Lena Morgan stared at her reflection in the cracked mirror of her modest bathroom, the fluorescent light above flickering slightly, casting a strange glow over her face. At 24, she had done everything that was expected of a bright, driven woman in New York City. She graduated magna cum laude from NYU, landed a steady marketing job at Stratosphere Media Group, and dutifully helped pay her father's mounting medical bills while raising her little sister after their mother passed away. But despite checking all the boxes, something gnawed at her, a kind of persistent ache deep inside, like she was playing a part in someone else's story rather than living her own. Her life felt like a slideshow, predictable and scheduled, clicking from frame to frame without real color. Joy came in small, fleeting moments. Her warm latte on a rainy day, her sister's laughter after school, the rare weekend she spent reading in Central Park. But those were the highlights in a routine that otherwise lacked depth. On this particular morning, the early sunlight streamed through the thin blinds of her bedroom window, laying golden stripes across the beige comforter. Lena stood before her closet, biting her lip as she examined her clothes. It was an important day. Today, Clara Yuen, her firm but brilliant boss, would be announcing the new international accounts manager. Lena's stomach churned with a mix of excitement and dread. She had poured herself into the role working late nights, skipping holidays, even learning conversational Mandarin just in case it helped woo their fast-growing Chinese client base. Her pitch decks had been flawless, her analytics projections spot on, her charm and client rapport praised in every review. She had earned this. She smoothed a navy blouse over her skirt and added a touch of pink lipstick, one small indulgence. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a text. Grayson Wolf. Coffee before work. I've got wild news about the Nexus Labs acquisition. Lena smiled, her lips twitching upward involuntarily. Grayson. They had known each other since they were 8 years old, growing up in Queens. Well, she'd taken the safe route. Always planning, always budgeting. Grayson had gone rogue, chasing wild tech dreams. And somehow, he'd made it. A self-made millionaire at 26. His AI startup had changed the landscape of consumer data analytics. And now, just weeks before, he'd hinted that a much bigger firm was trying to buy him out. But despite his meteoric rise, Grayson never forgot where he came from or who mattered. He was still Lena's best friend, still the guy who used to bring her chicken noodle soup when she had the flu, still the guy who knew her favorite song without having to ask. She texted back quickly, yes. Meet you at 8. The cozy corner cafe on West 45th hadn't changed in years. Its old brick walls and chipped wooden tables held the kind of worn-in charm that couldn't be our. Grayson was already there, sitting at their usual table near the window. He wore a gray cashmere sweater. Oh, you're early, He looked up from his phone and grinned. I had a feeling you'd be on time. Lena rolled her eyes, but couldn't help smiling. Today's the day Clara makes her decision. I know, he said, his eyes scanning her face. You're going to crush it. If they don't, Lena laughed. Let's hope they're not. A waitress brought over their regular orders, black coffee for him, caramel milk latte for her, Grayson CL, and wild acquisition updates. Lena added with a smirk. He leaned back in his chair, legs stretched out like he owned the room. Nexus Labs made a formal offer last night. 8-figure deal. I haven't said yes yet. Lena's eyes widened. That's huge. I know, he said, casually swirling his coffee. But it feels weird, like this whole thing is moving too fast. You've worked your ass off for this, she reminded him. If it feels right, take it. But don't let the speed scare you off. Sometimes good things happen fast. He gave her a look. That a personal or professional opinion? She blushed. Professional? Grayson chuckled. Thought so. There was a silence, then comfortable, familiar, but charged with something unspoken. Lena felt it crackle in the air between them, like static. She glanced down at her phone, noting the time. I should go. Don't want to be late. Grayson stood too. Want me to walk you over? She hesitated. I think I need to go in alone for this one. He nodded, understanding immediately. Text me after. I will. And with that, She turned and headed into the cool morning air, her heart thudding with nerves, unaware that the next few hours would unravel everything she had believed about her future. Stratosphere Meteor Group's headquarters towered over Midtown, its glass exterior catching the morning sun like a gleaming promise. Inside, the energy was electrifying with whispered speculation, hopeful glances, and the subtle tension of a dozen ambitious professionals waiting to see who would rise. Lena stepped out of the elevator onto the 19th floor, her heels clicking softly against the polished tile. She carried her neatly organized portfolio, its leather binding worn at the edges from use. A few co-workers looked up and gave her encouraging nods, some with tight smiles that said, "I hope it's Yalbit. I won't be surprised if it's not." She found her seat, took a breath, and opened her laptop. The screen lit up with her presentation slide desk color-coded, client-focused, meticulously prepared. She had memorized every line. She had secured 3 international clients on her own over the past year. She had learned the intricacies of Chinese business etiquette and drafted bilingual strategy briefs without being asked. If this promotion wasn't hers, then what was she even working toward? The office lights dimmed slightly. From her glass-walled corner suite, Clara Yuen emerged like a queen descending from her throne, poised, razor-sharp in a tailored ivory pantsuit. She surveyed the team, her black stiletto heels tapping out a steady rhythm of control. "Good morning," Clara said, her voice clipped but smooth. "Thank you for gathering on such short notice." Lena's heart pounded. She clasped her hands tightly in her lap, fighting the shake in her fingers. "As you all know, the role of International Accounts Manager has been open for the past quarter," Clara continued. "We've carefully evaluated the candidates based on client success, strategic thinking, cultural fluency, and executive presence." Lena's colleagues glanced her way. She caught her breath. Clara smiled faintly. "I'm pleased to announce the position will be filled by Kara Ellison from our Los Angeles branch." Silence fell like a stone. Clara went on. "Kara brings exceptional experience in global communications and has managed high-value accounts across 4 continents. Her ability to represent our brand internationally, particularly in Asia-Pacific markets, is unparalleled." Lena's stomach dropped. Kara Ellison, she'd never even met her. Not once. Not during any interbranch meetings. She had sacrificed months of her life, weekends, birthdays, sleep and leave for the role to go to someone who had barely set foot in the New York office. The words blurred. Applause rang out around her, polite and forced. She clapped too, numbly, because not clapping would be worse. Her chest ached with disappointment she tried desperately to hide. Then, as everyone dispersed, Clara's voice called out above the chatter, "Lena, could I see you in my office?" Clara's office was a blend of stark minimalism and subtle power. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline, and a wall of awards and magazine covers reminded every guest of her rise from obscurity to the peak of marketing prestige. Lena stood just inside the door, still holding her portfolio like a shield. "Come in, sit down," Clara said, gesturing to the sleek chair across from her glass desk. Lena obeyed. Her throat felt tight. "I imagine you're surprised," Clara said softly. "That's one word for it," Lena replied, the effort to stay composed stretching her voice thin. Clara folded her hands. "Let me start by saying that your work has been outstanding. You're one of the most talented young marketers on this team." "Then why wasn't I considered ready?" Lena asked quietly. Clara exhaled slowly. "It wasn't a question of performance. It was presentation." Lena blinked. "I'm sorry. Our international clients," Clara continued, "particularly those in older, more traditional sectors, expect a certain kind of sophistication. They expect familiarity with elite social events, international travel, subtle cultural etiquette. I've done all of that professionally," Lena said, biting back hurt. "I even taught myself Mandarin." "Yes, and it's impressive," Clara said, "but there's an unspoken layer. These clients discuss fine wines over dinner. They talk about art, global politics. They expect their account managers to speak the language of their world, not just in words, but in lifestyle." Lena stared. "So, I didn't get the job because I'm not worldly enough." Clara hesitated. "You're very talented, Lena, but sometimes experience outside of work, the kind that shapes confidence and charm in unpredictable settings, matters more than we admit." And suddenly, Lena understood. It wasn't about spreadsheets or strategy decks. It was about her quiet weekends, her nights spent budgeting bills instead of traveling, her lack of a romantic history that would allow her to speak casually about love and heartbreak over wine in Hong Kong. The rejection wasn't just about a job. It was personal, and it stung deeper than she could have imagined. Riley couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned beneath the thin quilt in her apartment, the moonlight spilling through the half-open blinds, casting silver stripes across the floor. Her thoughts raced like a runaway train. No matter how many deep breaths she took, they kept circling back to the promotion she didn't get, the cold professionalism in Clara Yuen's voice, the shame she felt at being labeled inexperienced. The words stung. It wasn't about her work ethics. Everyone at Stratosphere Media knew Riley Morgan was one of the sharpest minds on the floor. It was about her life, the unspoken expectation that, to lead international accounts, you had to be worldly, sophisticated, polished in all the ways she had spent her life avoiding so she could focus on surviving. She stared at her phone on the nightstand. One message blinked unread. "You okay?" From Aiden. Sent 3 hours ago. She didn't reply. She sat up in bed and pulled her knees to her chest, hugging them tightly. Her apartment was modest rooms, laminate flooring, and the smell of old radiator heat. But it was hers. She'd fought for every inch of it. And yet, tonight it didn't feel like enough. Her eyes drifted to the corkboard above her desk, cluttered with snapshots and clippings, proof of everything she had accomplished. College graduation, her first big campaign, a note from her dad that read, "You already have everything you need to win." But even those words weren't enough to drown out Clara's voice echoing in her memory. Someone who understands sophisticated social dynamics. Someone who isn't still figuring out adult relationships. She dropped her head into her hands. That final line had sliced deep. The implication wasn't just about romance. It was about being incomplete, less than, and for the first time in years, Riley felt small. Then, like a slow bloom in her mind, an idea took root. A wild, utterly inappropriate, risky idea. She lifted her head and stared blankly at the opposite wall. It wasn't the kind of thought you entertained if you wanted to stay safe. It was bold, unthinkable, and yet completely logical in its own twisted way. She needed someone she could trust, someone who wouldn't judge her, someone experienced, someone who cared enough not to hurt her, but distant enough not to complicate it with expectation. Her heart pounded. It could only be him, Aiden Wolf, her oldest friend, her confidant, the man who, just hours ago, confessed that he'd been in love with her for years. Could she really do this? Could she ask the man she trusted most in the world to sleep with her, just so she could gain the experience that Clara Yuen and the board expected? It sounded insane. It was insane. And yet, she couldn't shake the thought, not because she craved intimacy, but because she was tired of being boxed out of opportunities by a world that judged her for not having lived enough. She got up from the bed and paced the room barefoot, the floor cold against her soles. Her fingers shook as she picked up her phone. She opened a blank message thread. "Can we have dinner at your place this weekend? I need to ask you something important." She hit send and stared at the screen, heart thudding. It was done. The wheel was already turning. Whatever happened next, there was no going back. The cab ride to Julian Hart's penthouse felt like the longest journey of Aurora Bennett's life. As the city lights blurred past her window, she tried to steady the tremor in her fingers. It wasn't just anticipation that made her heart pound like a drum in her chest. It was the sense that tonight would change everything. She had spent the day trying to talk herself out of it. This plan, this arrangement, it had started as a desperate attempt to reclaim her confidence, to move forward from a moment of failure. But somewhere between the promotion that slipped through her hands and the vulnerability she exposed to Julian, something had shifted. Something deeper. When the elevator doors opened directly into Julian's penthouse, Roar stepped into a world that couldn't have been more different from her own. The space was massive, awash in soft lighting that reflected off polished marble and sleek furniture. Floor-to-ceiling windows displayed a glittering view of the city skyline, and the scent of fresh basil and tomatoes drifted from the open kitchen. Julian stood barefoot on the kitchen tile, dressed down in a navy sweater and slacks. He looked effortlessly elegant, even as he stirred a pot on the stove. "Hey," he said softly when he saw her. His eyes held the warmth of someone who had waited with care. Roar stepped inside, setting down her overnight bag with an almost apologetic clunk. "Your place is beautiful," he offered a modest smile. "Thank you. I figured we'd start with dinner. Something familiar. Pasta with roasted tomatoes, just like when we were kids." She let out a breathy laugh, some of her nerves easing. "You remembered that?" "Of course I did," he said, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. "You used to ask for it every Friday night when your mom worked late." They sat together at the small dining table tucked beside the windows. As they ate, they talked about their pasts, the schools they had attended, the dreams they used to whisper under the stars. Julian spoke about the pressures of running a tech empire, about the loneliness that crept in despite the success. Roar listened, surprised at how vulnerable he let himself be. She told him about her father's health, about juggling responsibilities and quietly losing parts of herself in the process. Julian didn't offer pity. He offered presence-y kind of listening that made her feel seen. When they finished the meal, Julian stood, took her hand gently, and led her to the large cream-colored couch that faced the city. They sat in silence for a moment. The air between them was heavy with everything unsaid. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked. Roar turned to him. "I came here because I trust you." Julian's expression turned serious, his voice low. "If we cross this line, Roar, I won't be able to pretend I don't love you." The words struck her like a wave. She stared at him, stunned. "Julian, you don't have to say anything," he murmured. "I just need you to know." She reached for his hand. "I think I need to see what this could become. I need to stop living afraid." The kiss was slow, reverent, filled with all the years of closeness and missed moments. When he finally pulled her close, the tension of the night melted away. Julian was careful, attentive, patient. He touched her like she was precious. Roar gave herself to him not out of obligation or strategy, but because she wanted to for herself. Later, as they lay tangled in soft sheets, Roar rested her head on Julian's chest, listening to the rhythm of his heartbeat. His fingers traced gentle lines along her shoulder. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "More than okay. I feel awake." He pressed a kiss to the crown of her head. "I'm glad." Roar didn't sleep much that night. She was too full of emotions she couldn't quite name, but she didn't feel anxious or restless. She felt alive. In the early hours of the morning, wrapped in a soft blanket, she stood by the window and looked out at the awakening city. Julian came up behind her and placed his arms around her waist. "Whatever happens next," he said, "we face it together." And she believed him. The morning after their unforgettable night, Leela stirred to the scent of rich coffee and the sound of quiet jazz drifting from the penthouse kitchen. Sunlight filtered softly through the sheer curtains, casting a golden hue across the room. She stretched beneath the smooth cotton sheets and blinked, her mind adjusting to the warmth of the unfamiliar setting. Elias was already awake, wearing his usual relaxed expression, standing at the kitchen island with two steaming mugs in hand. He looked up and grinned. "Morning, sleepyhead. I hope you like hazelnut." Leela sat up, holding the sheet around her. "It smells amazing, and I can't believe I slept so late." He handed her the mug, brushing a kiss to her forehead. "You needed it. Last night was intense." She blushed but nodded. "Intense, beautiful, unexpected." They sat together on the couch, knees touching, sipping coffee. For a few blissful moments, the world outside ceased to exist. But eventually, the conversation turned. "What happens now, Elias?" Leela asked. Last night changed things, and as much as I don't regret it, I'm terrified. Elias placed his mug down. I don't want to pretend like it didn't happen. I'm not going to act like we're still just friends. Because the truth is, Leela, I'm in love with you. I've been in love with you for longer than I can remember. Lila's breath hitched. She wanted to believe those words. She had dreamed of them in the quietest corners of her heart. But hearing them now, after everything, made it all feel fragile and surreal. Do you mean that? She asked, searching his eyes. Because I don't think I could handle this being just another passing phase for you. Elias scooted closer, reaching for her hand. This is real for me, more real than anything else. And I know we come from different worlds. And I know I should have said it earlier. But I was scared too. Tears welled in Lila's eyes. She had spent so long convincing herself that people like Elias couldn't possibly love girls like her, girls who clean houses to pay rent, who carried wounds that couldn't be seen. I don't need diamonds or private jets, Elias, she whispered. I just need to know that you won't run the first time things get hard. He squeezed her hand. I swear to you, I'm not going anywhere. And just like that, a promise was sealed not with grand declarations, but with quiet conviction. Later that week, Elias invited Leela to a small dinner party he was hosting for a few close friends and business partners. It was the first time he would introduce her as someone more than just a childhood friend. You don't have to come if you're not ready, Elias said gently, brushing a loose curl from her face. Leela squared her shoulders. No, I want to. I'm tired of hiding, tired of pretending that I'm not enough. The night of the dinner, she wore a simple emerald green dress that accentuated her figure. She didn't look like the girl who scrubbed kitchen tiles for a living. She looked like someone who belonged. The evening began smoothly. Elias never left her side, making sure to include her in conversations, proudly introducing her to everyone. She laughed, answered questions about her background, and felt more herself than she had in weeks. That was until she overheard a conversation from one of Elias's older colleagues. She's sweet, the man said to another, but does Elias really think she can handle his world? She's not exactly our kind. Lila's stomach dropped. The words echoed every fear she'd tried to bury. The fragile confidence she had built began to crumble. Elias noticed immediately. What happened? She shook her head. Just someone reminding me of where I came from. He took her hand and led her outside to the quiet terrace, away from prying eyes. Listen to me, he said firmly. You don't have to prove anything to them. You don't need their approval. You're here because I love you, because you matter. She looked away, blinking back tears. I just don't want to be the reason people doubt you. Elias tilted her chin up. The only thing they need to see is that I'm happier with you than I've ever been. If they can't handle that, it's their problem, not ours. In that moment, with the city lights twinkling behind them and the man she loved choosing her openly, Leela felt something shift. The weight of judgment, of doubt, lessened. They returned to the party hand in hand, stronger than before. Before the night ended, Elias raised a toast to the people who challenge us, who support us, and who remind us what truly matters, and to the unexpected moments that become everything. He glanced at Leela, and everyone followed his gaze. She smiled, her heart full. In a world where appearances often meant everything, Elias had chosen substance, and Lila, flawed, scared, but deeply loving, was exactly what he wanted. Their story was far from over, but with each promise, each challenge met side by side, they were writing something real, something lasting. The scent of lilacs drifted through the open windows of their country home, mixing with the laughter of children playing in the yard. It had been 1 year since Eleanor Cruz and Aidan Blackwell had said their vows in a quiet, sunlit garden, surrounded by a blend of worlds once thought too different to intertwine. But now, their life had become a harmony neither of them had imagined. Elena sat on the wraparound porch with a sketchpad in her lap, the morning sun warming her bare shoulders. She watched her daughter Mia chase Aidan's golden retriever, Bandit, through the tall grass, her laughter bright and careless. Nearby, Aiden was helping his nephew set up a lemonade stand at the end of the driveway. The picture of a CEO who had traded a boardroom for backyard adventures. The road to this peace had not been without struggle. There were still moments when Elena doubted her place in Aiden's world-polished events, the hushed meetings with foreign investors, the looming shadow of press always wanting a glimpse of their lives. But those insecurities were quieter now, buried under layers of trust and shared experience. Every morning she woke up beside him was a quiet reassurance. She belonged. Their wedding had been a beautiful whirlwind. Elena's father walked her down the aisle, eyes glassy with pride. Her modest white dress hand-sewn by a neighbor shimmered under the golden light. Aiden stood at the altar in a crisp navy suit, looking at her like she was the only thing in the universe that mattered. And when he spoke his vows, he promised not just to love her, but to always protect the heart of the woman who had changed everything. Post-wedding, Elena had taken a leap of faith. She launched her own graphic design firm's niche, focused on social impact campaigns and helping local artists establish their brands. With Aiden's encouragement, never his interference, grew it into something she could call hers. And it flourished, not because of his name, but because she poured her soul into every client, every design. Meanwhile, Aiden began to entangle himself from the constant demands of empire building. He delegated more, traveled less. He spent late nights helping Mira with her reading or curled up beside Eleanor watching documentaries about architecture and nature. He had built a fortune, but now he was building a life. One warm Sunday afternoon, Elena and Aiden walked hand in hand through the vineyard behind their home, rows of green stretching toward the horizon. The air was filled with birdsong and the hum of bees. "You know," Elena said, squeezing his hand, "if someone had told me 2 years ago that this would be my life, I would have left." Aiden smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "And if someone told me that love could come from a sketchpad and a stubborn woman in sneakers, I would have thought they were insane." She leaned into him, heartful. "I'm not stubborn. I just know what I want. And thank God for that," he murmured, "because what you wanted turned out to be everything I never knew I needed." A few steps ahead, Mia shouted for them to come see the butterfly she had caught. Elena and Aiden quickened their pace, laughing as they raced toward her. That night, after tucking Mia into bed and watching the stars blink to life from their balcony, Aiden turned to Eleanor. "Let's build something else," he said. She looked at him, curious. "Like what?" "A retreat. A sanctuary. A space where kids from difficult backgrounds like the one you came from can come and learn, heal, explore. You could teach design. I could bring in entrepreneurs and mentors." Her eyes sparkled with tears. "You do that with me?" He kissed her forehead. "I'd do anything with you." Because this, he gestured to their home. Their life, this only matters if we get to share it. And in that moment, under a sky full of stars and the echo of their daughter's laughter still in the air, Elena knew this wasn't the end of a fairy tale. It was the start of a new chapter. A chapter where love didn't just conquer, it grew, expanded, and gave back.